Have you ever just had this feeling that there's more to reality than what we can see and touch? That underneath the surface of our busy, everyday lives, there's this whole unseen world of energy, of vibration, of frequency. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. These hidden frequencies of consciousness that are humming within us and all around us.
Just let that sink in for a second. Before anything we know existed, there was a primal vibration, a resonance. Some of the oldest traditions on Earth didn't just call this energy, they called it the voice of God. It was like a foundational hum that set everything else into motion.
And what's so wild is that this ancient hum, it isn't gone. It's not some distant echo from the Big Bang that faded away. No, it's a living frequency. And it resonates inside every single one of us, connecting the massive scale of the cosmos right down to the very core of our own being.
So this brings us to a really important question, a personal one. Right now, in this very moment, are you broadcasting something invisible? The answer, as you're about to see, is more real and way more powerful than you've probably ever imagined.
Okay, so here's the thing. We are, at our core, electrical beings. Our bodies aren't just bags of cells and bones. They're more like living, breathing instruments. And every single one of our inner states, our thoughts, our feelings, our intentions, is constantly creating a very real, measurable, energetic signature.
And the connection here is incredibly direct. Your thoughts, they aren't just these abstract ideas floating around in your head. They literally create tiny pulses of voltage in your brain. And your emotions, they do way more than just make you feel happy or sad. They physically, measurably shift the rhythm of your heart.
And the amazing thing is, we can measure all of this. Your brain, for example, is constantly emitting different frequencies. When you're in a deep, dreamless sleep, that's delta. When you're just chilling out, relaxed, that's alpha. And those incredible aha moments of pure insight, that's your brain firing in the gamma state, literally the highest frequency of consciousness we can measure.
But the brain isn't the only broadcaster in your body. In fact, it might not even be the most powerful one. Let's talk about the heart. For centuries, we've just seen it as this mechanical pump, right? But what science is now revealing is that the heart has its own intelligence, its own memory, and its own incredibly powerful field of energy. And here is the absolute kicker, confirmed by decades of research. The heart's electromagnetic field is by far the strongest in the entire body. We're talking not even close. This field literally expands outward from you, and its quality, its signature, is being shaped moment by your emotional state.
Specific emotions create these distinct, measurable patterns. Anger, it creates a chaotic, incoherent signal. But gratitude, that creates harmony. Worship creates this beautiful state of coherence. And then look at love. Love doesn't just create a pattern. Research shows it has the power to fundamentally change the very frequency of the human heart. Now, this is where it all starts to click together, where things get really profound. What we're seeing is that the very things modern science is now measuring with supersensitive equipment, well, ancient spiritual traditions have been describing them for thousands of years. They're talking about the exact same experience. They're just using different languages.
So in science, they call it coherence. It's this measurable state of peak internal alignment. It's when your brain waves and your heart rhythms literally sync up and start working together in perfect harmony. It's a state of optimal peak function.
Now compare that to what the mystics called it, divine union, a state of deep connection and oneness with a higher power. So you have to ask yourself, are these two different things, or are they just two different ways of describing the same profound state of being?
It really seems to be a universal human experience, doesn't it? Whether someone calls it receiving the Holy Spirit, or achieving enlightenment, or feeling an inner fire, or accessing higher consciousness, these are all just different labels trying to describe the same fundamental reality, a state where we align with something much, much greater than ourselves.
And this alignment, it might have effects that go far beyond just our own bodies. I mean, some theories in physics get really mind-bending, suggesting that at the quantum level, the very building blocks of the universe behave like waves of vibration. It's a wild idea, but it opens the door to the possibility that our own focused awareness, our own coherent frequency, could actually interact with reality itself. So
If we all have this incredible potential for alignment just sitting inside of us, why is it so hard to access? Why don't we feel it all the time? Well, that brings us to the core conflict of our modern lives. We are drowning in noise. The constant distraction and interference of the world is scrambling our natural inner signal.
You can think of it like this: that subtle inner guidance, that intuition, that connection, it's a whisper. And that whisper is trying to be heard in a world that is constantly screaming for our attention with notifications, news cycles, and endless demands.
And the consequences of this frequency interference are very, very real. The feelings of anxiety, confusion, emptiness, and despair that are so common today, you could almost see them as symptoms. They're the static we hear and feel when our spiritual dial is just a little bit off.
Which leads us to this really empowering question. What if the problem isn't that we're fundamentally broken? What if we're just misaligned? What if all that static isn't some permanent flaw in who we are, but simply a sign that we need to retune our frequency?
So how do we actually do that? How do we cut through all that noise? Well, this final part is all about the solution. It's about clear, actionable methods for clearing out the static and finally finding your true signal again. So let's just walk through these. Stillness isn't about doing nothing. It's about creating the space to actually hear the signal. Gratitude, as we saw, literally harmonizes your heart's rhythm. Forgiveness is like clearing out old corrupt computer files that cause interference. Worship, and that can mean reverence for a higher power or just a deep sense of awe for nature or art or life itself. It elevates your entire emotional field. And finally, love. Love becomes the highest, most coherent frequency you can possibly broadcast.
And when you start to actually practice these things, you begin to live in an aligned state. And the result is a life with this profound sense of clarity and purpose and peace. Guidance becomes clear. Faith feels natural. You're no longer fighting against the current. You're just flowing with it. This is the goal, right here, for your mind, your heart, and your spirit to sync up into one. When that happens, you resonate like a single, finely tuned instrument. You're not just thinking or feeling anymore. You are perceiving reality on a much deeper, more truthful level.
And never, ever forget your significance in all this. You aren't just a passive receiver of some frequency. No way. You are the bridge. Your very being connects the physical world of atoms with the unseen world of spirit. You are the place where these two realities meet and interact.
So the final takeaway is really just a simple but profound invitation. The frequency is always there. The signal has never, ever been lost. The only thing required of us is to clear away the noise, to find a moment of quiet, and to just listen. Be still, and you will hear it.